Early in my consulting career, a prospective client gave me some feedback that would change my life. You see, they'd seen me give a talk on behavioural economics and were interested in how I could help them gain customers for their new bedding range. No problem. I outlined the behavioural techniques we would use to frame pricing, create a sense of urgency, and overcome customer concerns about buying what was an unfamiliar brand. The proposal, well, I thought it was a slam dunk. And this is the response I got. After some follow-up, I finally heard back from them. That's when I got the feedback I would never forget. And can I say it was painful. I mention it because this feedback might apply to you, to your colleagues, because it's particularly important for those who work in the field of behavioural insights to get this right. What was the feedback? You don't walk your talk. Ouch. This client quite rightly pointed out that while I might have talked about the behavioural techniques we could use with their customers, I didn't use these same techniques in my proposal. I had failed to see the pitching process as a behavioural change task. And as a result, I didn't walk my talk. Why I bring this up today is that what I've observed amongst my very talented behavioural science colleagues is that we are great at the assignment, at filling the brief, at analysing and devising solutions to real-life business and societal issues. But we're not always so good at using the same behavioural techniques we use to influence external customers to influence our own behaviour and that of our colleagues. And why is this important? Because to get the assignment, we have to influence people to give us the assignment. We have to convince them there is a problem, or that the problem they think they have isn't the real problem. Or we have to get them to invite us to meetings, engage us early in product development, pricing, marketing, or procurement processes, or to influence them to prioritise what we need from them over things they need to get done. Whatever it is, we call ourselves insights leads or user experience professionals. That's only a fraction of what we spend our time doing. Our work is more like 80% getting the work and 20% doing the work. So are we walking our talk 100% of the time? I fear not. An example. I saw a job posting on LinkedIn a while back. It was for a behavioural insights role and required skills in behavioural economics. But the job description itself was a densely written 3-page Word document to which they had applied exactly 0 behavioural techniques. It was a veritable wall of words that is one of the least engaging job ads I've ever seen. When seeking to influence a candidate to apply for a behavioural insights role, what sort of signal are you sending if that ad demonstrates no behavioural insights? But therein lies the rub. To know behavioural principles and to use them are very different things. So, in our brief time together, I thought I would share some ideas about how to help you and your colleagues use behavioural techniques on rather than just in your business. I want to tackle 3 problems you might encounter. Justifying why we need behavioural research, how to use behavioural science in your day-to-day, and why facts aren't always enough. The models I'm going to use to explain these 3 problems are detailed in my book, The Williams Behaviour Book. I'll share how you can get your copy towards the end of this session. Let's start with problem 1. Justifying why we need behavioural economics when we already do so much research. At the risk of completely undermining my credibility, I want to share another example of me botching a client meeting.
This is really embarrassing for me.
This one is from about 11 years ago. It was a large financial services firm, and I was meeting with their head of insights. Interesting, Bri, he said after we'd spent some time talking about behavioural economics. But we already do a range of research. We have insights about consumer behaviour. Why is this different? At the time, I didn't have a satisfactory answer. I couldn't articulate why they should invest in this on top of everything else they were doing. But ever since, I have been able to answer that question, and it has completely changed the game. And my answer is this: my consumer insights landscape. Use this whenever you need to explain to a stakeholder why we need to invest more in our insights. It goes like this. When it comes to behavioural insights, we can look at future behaviour and past behaviour. What are we more interested in? Future behaviour. We want to know what people will do if we change a policy, launch a new product, create a marketing campaign, and so on. There's two ways we can understand behaviour. There's self-reported behaviour, so what people tell us, and observed behaviour, what we see people do. Self-reported behaviour is the realm of focus groups, satisfaction surveys, and questionnaires. It's when we ask them questions. For future behaviour, we can ask, what will you do if, as a hypothetical? Or for past behaviour, we can ask, why did you do that? Seeking an explanation. As interesting as self-reported behaviour is, what people say isn't necessarily what they do. For example, people say they want to switch their phone company, bank, or utilities provider, but very few of us do. It's not that they're lying to us when we ask these questions, it's that humans are sense-making narrators of our lives. We're not great at predicting our behaviour, but we're very good at rationalising it. The challenge in insights is that self-reported behaviour is compelling. Anecdotes that come straight from the mouths of our customers carry weight. Too much weight, in my opinion. We base significant business decisions on what people tell us they want and scratch our heads when that's not what they buy, click, or choose. So, what about observed behaviour? Observed behaviour, what we see people do, avoids the say versus do gap that we've just been speaking about. So, how do we get it? Two ways. The first is observable data. Clicks on our website, scan data from retail stores, staff turnover rates, the number of people who have completed a form, for example. Given their nature, these data are in the past. They are a record from a point in time of what people have actually done. But remember, we're interested in future behaviour. Now, the promise of big data and AI is that these data can be predictive. Patterns can be identified and extrapolated. The challenge, though, is that most organisations I've worked with and for are still struggling with legacy systems that have patchy data, or all the data systems don't talk to each other, let alone being able to predict behaviour. So we're left with this problem. How can we predict what people will do based on observed rather than self-reported behaviour? How do we, as insights professionals, answer the question for our stakeholders, if we do this, what will they do? That's the role I believe behavioural science, and more particularly behavioural economics, plays. Understanding human wiring based on observed behaviour, which will help us anticipate and influence outcomes. I say observed behaviour because behavioural economics is primarily based on experiments that monitor what people do rather than asking them why or what they'll do. From these experiments, we can extract hardwired behavioural principles we can use to predict what people are likely to do. So, why is behavioural economics different? Why do we need to invest in this in addition to our voice of the customer programs? So we can anticipate and design for real behaviour. But there's a problem using behavioural economics. which leads me to the second problem you might be grappling with. If your stakeholders are interested in using behavioural science, how do you help them to do it? How do we use behavioural science day to day? As good as it is, the challenge with behavioural economics is that there are hundreds of behavioural principles, these biases and heuristics. Impressive, but impossible to work with. How do you write an email, design a policy, design effective training or marketing campaigns? You do it with the help of a behavioural model. There are many models out there. COM-B is popular, and I've seen the UK Behavioural Insights team's Mindspace and East frameworks being referenced a lot. The challenge is knowing which model to use for which purpose. In my book, I have an overview of behavioural models which might help you navigate the smorgasbord. For example, some are great for looking outward at customer behaviour. Some are useful for looking inward at your processes. Some are better in the diagnosis phase, others for design. For the purposes of today, I'll touch on my model, the Williams Behaviour Change Model, and why it's so useful. It starts by recognising that everything we do in business is about behaviour change. We need to get people from point A, what they're currently doing, to point B, what we would like them to do. This is our behavioural objective. A is not buying, B is buying. A is not clicking, B is clicking. A is not responding to our email, B is responding. In order to get a person or a group of people from A to B, there are three things standing in our way. Three core behavioural barriers. They can't be bothered. This I call lazy. In formal terms, it's System 1 processing. They are scared. They are worried about proceeding. This is loss aversion. And they are confused. They want to act but are not sure what to do. This is choice overload. And this is what behaviour boils down to: lazy, scared, and confused. By distilling our work down to what's our behavioural objective and which of the three barriers are standing in our way, we can design more effective communications, products, and initiatives. Of course, there's more to the model than we've had time for today, but its simplicity belies its power. Imagine how meaningful your conversations with colleagues can be when you have a shared understanding of how humans are designed to make decisions and act on them. Every time you sit down to write an email, or every time you meet with a stakeholder to discuss a project, you can ask yourself, how do I overcome laziness? In other words, make them care enough to bother. How do I overcome fear? How can I give them the confidence to proceed while making them nervous about not proceeding? And have I made it clear what they need to do so they don't get confused? Now, one of the seemingly obvious ways to get people from A to B is telling them why it's important. And that brings us to the third problem I thought I would address today, because it's a big one in organisations. Why facts aren't always enough. A number of years ago, senior executives were asked to describe their decision-making style. 59% said they were analytical, data-driven, empirical. Only 10% said they were intuitive. They were then asked a follow-up question. If the available data contradicted your gut, what would you do? Well, 87% said they'd reanalyze the data or seek more data. Only 10% said they would follow the course suggested by the data. Can you see what's happening here? People who say they are data-driven only rely on that data if it is consistent with their intuition. This explains why you might present what you think is a rock-solid case for an initiative and it goes nowhere. It's not the facts you need to worry about. It's the feelings about the facts. This is what I call facting. And facting is where you need to focus your behavioural skills, because that will be the difference between your work getting traction or not. I know insights purists will say you need to let the data talk for itself, that our role is not to influence. But that is impossible. And I think denying our responsibility as experts in behaviour. Because when you are communicating, you are influencing. Whenever you present a data point, a graph, an anecdote, how you've chosen to present it will have a bearing on how it is received. What scale will you use? What colours? What information will you share first? How much will you share? Will you do it in person or via email? In the morning or last thing on a Friday? You cannot not influence. It's up to you, though, whether you want to influence your stakeholders to ignore what you're telling them or to act on it. Now, if this is a topic that is of interest, it might be worth checking out my Arming Your Advocate model, in which I talk through how to table an idea with a stakeholder. The secret lies in balancing their personal concerns with the concerns of the business. Speaking of which, I mentioned that the themes of my presentation today have come from my book, the Williams Behaviour Book, 50 Models to Influence Action. You are most welcome to download a free sample chapter from my site, briwilliams.com. And here is a QR code to do just that. You'll recall I started this session with some painful feedback that I wasn't walking my talk. My concern is, as behavioural science practitioners, we often get so fixated on its use with external customers that we forget to use it in our day-to-day. Remember, we need to use it to get the assignment, not just do the assignment. So while I've spent the bulk of today talking about stakeholders, there's someone who is most central to this, and it's you. Because it's not just our customers who are lazy, scared, and confused. It's not just our colleagues. It's each of us as individuals. To be better behavioural insights leaders, to lead the uptake and embrace of behavioural science, we need first and foremost to influence ourselves to change how we behave. We need, in every interaction, to walk our talk.